I had an interesting thought pop up yesterday out of nowhere, and it was, why do we grieve? Like, what are the evolutionary benefits to grieving? Wouldn't it be more advantageous for us as humans to not grieve at all, to be able to move through losing somebody or losing something easier so that we can actually move forward and want to continue pursuing life to its highest degree? So I looked this up, and of course this always comes back to survival and being a part of a group, which is where the majority of our issues in modern life, that disconnect between when our brain was developing and the world we currently occupy, like that's where all of our problems really stem from right now. So basically, it has to do with the effect it has on the brain to get you to firstly learn from that grief. It prevents you from wanting to potentially lose someone again. It's basically telling you like, hey, if you go through this again, if you get close to somebody, you are going to feel this immense pain. It's going to trigger your fight or flight. You're going to have memories that are going to seep into your everyday life when you're reminded of this person. And therefore, maybe you shouldn't do it again. But that didn't make sense to me. It doesn't really make sense, because the other answer I got was that you are going to need the help of other people during this process of grieving this person. And therefore, it should motivate you to seek out more people and therefore get closer with people, because grief can absolutely bring people together. When someone close to a whole group of people dies or gets lost in some other way, it strengthens the bonds usually of all those people. And maybe they weren't even that close before the loss happened, but now they are. So it makes sense biologically when we take all those things into consideration. But then I think about how many people have lost loved ones and how risk averse that makes them, how much that makes them not want to pursue, let's say, another relationship or just get attached to anything, because you can grieve sentimental objects. You can grieve, I don't know, things that aren't sentient, right? I've even written a piece on Substack about grieving the lives we never lived. We can absolutely grieve a version of ourselves that we were never able to attain. And I think I talked about this on a previous video on this channel, actually, now that I think about it, about a version of me that I thought would happen regarding a certain friend group, and I was never able to fulfill it because my life just developed in a different way. And there was a period of time where I kind of like really felt the loss of a person I never became. And so I've really been trying to think about this. Like, what is the benefit to grieving if there is the potential for that grief to cause you to never want to create close relationships again and get close to people especially? I think that's what I want to focus on. And the answer, I think, lies in that disconnect. I think grief made sense. It made way more sense for our bodies to grieve somebody, let's say a few thousand years ago, because you are literally just with a tribe of people. And when you lose somebody, the only thing that's going to happen is that tribe is going to get closer knit. They're going to reminisce on all the memories they had with that person. They're going to think to themselves, we want to honor this person and we want to become our best selves in order to celebrate the life of someone we lost. And it only strengthens their ability to process grief in the future when they inevitably lose someone else. Now, grief can absolutely only happen in isolation. You can lose a loved one, you can lose a girlfriend, a boyfriend, a wife, or a husband, and you may potentially never be able to like interact with people during that grieving process. And therefore, it creates this opportunity for the grief to basically permanently damage you. Because, I mean, we're very isolated now. We're very lonely now. We don't have as many opportunities to be with other people during the grieving process. And if you don't, and if you do not possess the ability to overcome the intense emotions that will come with grief, and no one is there to help you, all the grief is going to do is probably make life worse. You're probably not going to have the mental fortitude to push through, especially if it's like your first time grieving something. You are not getting any benefit from the grief. It is only deterring your strength as a person and your ability to move forward. And that is why I think grief today is way more difficult to deal with than it might have been, let's say, 1,000 years ago or so. So obviously, being around people, getting social support it's actually like crucial. It's almost crucial to being able to process grief, at least the first time you go through a really heavy loss, because without the tools to know what to do, at least we have the internet now, right? Like, at least you could look up on the internet how to process grief, how to get through this, and that might help you. It's kind of a artificial way of being around a person who understands this loss better than you and is kind of giving you a virtual pat on the back. Besides that, I mean, you really need to lean on other people during the grieving process. You just need any small glimmer of hope that things are going to get better. Because if your brain is constantly in that fight or flight mode and it never gives itself, or you never give it the space to properly heal, because you're just reliving the time where the loss happened, you'll never be the same person again in a bad way. You're supposed to come out of grief having a deeper appreciation for life and for what you can accomplish and the brevity of time we have here on Earth. But if you don't possess that capability, then you're going to come out of the grief a different person, but it's going to be someone who says, life isn't worth living. This is way too hard for me. I don't know how I'm going to get over this. There's people that I've had in my comment section who their girlfriend or boyfriend broke up with them like 2 years ago, and they're still grieving. That is not normal. It shouldn't take that long for your brain to realize we're no longer in the time period in which the loss happened. Because that's what's happening, if I'm to explain this further. Your brain is convinced that, this is all trauma, by the way. Your brain is convinced that you are still in the time period, the event that caused the grief, that caused the trauma. It's basically transporting you back to that time when you are going through grief. And so, if nothing in your environment is convincing you that this time is over, aka you don't have some sort of social support, or the second thing I'm going to tell you, which is absolutely required to let go and to process and get through grief, then grief is going to be a damaging inherent quality of existence. So here's the second thing. The second thing, which I've repeated a lot, it's genuinely one of the most helpful things I ever thought about and processed in my mind, is that in order to move through grief, in order to let go of the past, you must outgrow the version of yourself that existed when the grief happened. That is why, if your brain still thinks you are the same person that you were when you lost that person or thing, and it has no evidence that anything's changed, it is way more likely to just keep you reliving that event. And so what you got to do is quite literally like outgrow that identity that happened during that time period. This is what I had to do to stop crying every night, to actually process why I even felt this way about this person and still felt this way even like a few months after. when my second girlfriend broke up with me. It was because my life for a small period of time wasn't changing, because it was right when the pandemic started. The pandemic, I mean, if you went through grief during the pandemic, that hit you fucking hard because you had no ability to change, to outgrow the version of yourself. Every day was basically the same. You couldn't even see people. It was the same day over and over. There was no way for your brain to say to itself, oh, okay, the grief's over. The traumatic event's over. We're moving on. No, you need that. And the pandemic, it didn't allow me to have that for the first few months. But when I moved out of my parents' house, which is where a lot of these memories of my ex-girlfriend were stored, when I started changing my routine on a daily basis, I stopped smoking weed. I woke up earlier, started working on my business more, the YouTube more. That's when my brain and my body registered, oh shit, we actually aren't at the event in which you lost someone anymore. And then it allows you to actually move on. Does that mean that event didn't change me? No, grief is supposed to change you. Like I said, it's supposed to change you positively. And that's why I outgrew that version of myself, became a better self. It's supposed to force you into action and seek social support. But if you don't have the opportunity to do that, then grief is going to continue wreaking havoc on your life. And so not all of us have the ability to seek out social support right now. I understand that. Maybe at least not towards grief and being able to open up to somebody about that. And if that's the case, I've made videos about going through grief and like I was just explaining here, my breakup. If you look up Cole Hastings breakup, it's the first video. Seems to have helped a lot of people. It could be your sort of virtual social support. But additionally, you have to outgrow the version of yourself that existed when the grief happened. If you are living the exact same life that you were when you went through that grief, you're going to feel like you're still there. Your body and brain it can't tell the difference because it's not getting what it used to get a couple thousand years ago to process and move through that so that the body can say, I've learned something from this, but I'm no longer in this stage. So I know it's so hard when you're grieving somebody. You don't know why you even feel this way sometimes if it's so far after the actual event. And no matter what, I do want to remind you this, no matter what, some things, maybe even years later, are going to trigger you a little bit, and you're going to feel those emotions that maybe you felt during that time you were heavily grieving. But it's not going to have nearly as much of an impact on you so long as you do what I set out for you to do here. Yes, grief is confusing. You wonder why it even exists, like I wondered, because wouldn't it be so much easier for humans to not have the ability to grieve and therefore just have a greater chance of surviving catastrophe? But no, the more you think about it, the more it makes sense. The more you realize that grief is supposed to teach you something. It's supposed to be, as hard as it is, a positive development on your character. And there is a beautiful quote that I'll always remember that I heard when I was at one of my friend's dad's funeral. And it was, grief is the price we pay for love. If you truly love something, you're going to lose it one day. Everything in this world is impermanent. And the things that are truly worth fighting for and loving, they're going to eventually decay and go away. And I believe the truest, highest human experience is when we open ourselves up to love. When we say, despite the fact that I know getting attached to this thing or person is going to cause grief in the future, I'm going to do it anyway because that's when I feel most alive. That's what it means to be human. To be human is to grieve, to lose, to suffer. but at the same time, experience the opposite of all of those sensations because I'm deciding to love. And you do love, and you get happy, and you get to experience joy with other people because you've decided that grief is the inevitable price of all that, and you're strong enough to accept that. I don't always explain these topics the absolute best that I can when I'm talking unscripted, but this is a huge theme in my novel that I'm writing right now. I'm writing a novel about a 21-year-old who lives in a post-pandemic world, our present world, who goes through this very tragic loss. He loses his mom, and because of that, because of the trauma he goes through, he develops the ability to shift into a parallel reality. So I'm going to talk a lot about getting through grief, about love, about the difficulties of human life and how to persevere through them, and mix it with fantasy and sci-fi. So if that sounds interesting to you, you can get updates on the novel as I'm writing it by subscribing to my Substack. The updates are at the bottom of each newsletter. And if you want to talk to people, have that social support every weekend, you can join my Self-Mastery School, where we meet in a video call every single weekend, and we just talk about stuff like this, stuff we're struggling with, how to get through it, get advice from a bunch of other people who are interested in self-development and pursuing the highest life that they can. So if you want to join that group, you can also click one of the links in my description. It's called Self-Mastery School. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.